Every great era in boxing produces a moment when the question of supremacy rises to the surface, when two fighters from different trajectories collide, and the sport collectively holds its breath. For the modern generation, that moment may arrive in September 2025, when two of the finest boxers of the last 2 decades, Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford, stand across from one another in the ring. It is not merely a fight, but a convergence of stories, styles, and legacies. For Canelo, the long-reigning Mexican superstar, it is a question of whether his reign can extend into a new chapter. For Crawford, the undefeated master of adaptation, it is an opportunity to confirm his place among the immortals by defeating a larger, more celebrated man. Together, they represent not only 2 champions, but also 2 philosophies of combat. Canelo Alvarez's journey from teenage prodigy to global icon is one of the sport's most carefully chronicled ascents. Born in Guadalajara, he grew up in a fighting family and entered the professional ranks as a teenager, often battling men older and more experienced than himself. His flaming red hair, compact frame, and bruising style quickly made him a curiosity and then a sensation. Mexico, a nation that has produced warriors in nearly every era, saw in him not only talent but also potential superstardom. From his earliest days, he carried the expectation of becoming more than just a champion. He was meant to be the new face of Mexican boxing. Through the years, Alvarez delivered. He captured world titles in 4 different weight classes, starting from junior middleweight and rising all the way to light heavyweight. Along the way, he faced some of the most recognizable names in the sport. He battled Shane Mosley, learning under the bright lights. He fought Miguel Cotto, defeating the Puerto Rican great to establish himself as more than just a rising star. His most publicized rivalry came against Gennady Golovkin, whose fearsome punching and iron chin had made him the middleweight division's boogeyman. Their first 2 fights were razor-close controversies that still ignite debate, but in the trilogy's final chapter, Canelo pulled away to settle the rivalry. Those battles, along with victories over Daniel Jacobs, Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Plant, solidified Alvarez as not just a Mexican superstar, but as perhaps the most bankable attraction in boxing worldwide. When he defeated Plant, he became the undisputed super middleweight champion, collecting all 4 major titles in the division. His career achievements are already immense. Multiple championships across weight classes, victories over Hall of Fame caliber opponents, and the kind of mainstream recognition that only a handful of fighters achieve in any era. And yet, even great champions change with time. In recent years, Canelo's style has shifted. The youthful aggression that once made him a relentless body puncher has mellowed into something more measured. He no longer presses forward with the same sustained ferocity. Instead, he conserves energy, waits for openings, and strikes in sudden bursts. Against Sergey Kovalev at light heavyweight, he relied on patience before delivering a knockout. Against Saunders and Plant, he employed a calculated, almost clinical breakdown of his opponents. But against Dmitry Bivol, in his second foray into light heavyweight, his limitations became clearer. The larger, fresher man outworked him, piling up rounds through activity, while Canelo's bursts proved insufficient. For the first time in years, Alvarez looked like a fighter who could be managed, perhaps even solved. That defeat did not erase his accomplishments, but it hinted at a vulnerability that could matter against the wrong kind of opponent. It is here where Terence Crawford enters the picture. Crawford's rise has been slower and quieter, but no less remarkable. Born in Omaha, Nebraska, far from the sport's traditional hotbeds, he developed into one of the most complete fighters of his generation. Unlike Canelo, who carried the burden of superstardom from his teenage years, Crawford's career unfolded with patience, as he moved from lightweight to junior welterweight and finally to welterweight. At each stop, he left no doubt. He became the undisputed champion at 140 pounds, defeating Julius Indongo to collect all 4 belts. At welterweight, he did the same, Unifying the division in emphatic style, Crawford's gift is not only his skill but also his adaptability. Few fighters in history have shown the ability to change mid-fight as effortlessly as he does. He can begin a bout boxing orthodox, switch to southpaw within moments, and alter his rhythm based on what his opponent presents. He studies his adversary, reads their patterns, and gradually takes control. Rarely does he lose rounds. More often, he starts measured, then increases pressure until his opponent collapses. Against Shawn Porter, he became the first man to stop the rugged contender, a fighter previously known for his toughness. Against Errol Spence Jr., in what was billed as a 50-50 superfight, Crawford produced a performance so dominant it shocked even his admirers. He floored Spence multiple times and finished him in 9 one-sided rounds, a result that elevated Crawford from merely great to perhaps transcendent. To watch Crawford is to witness a chameleon. He does not simply impose one style, but instead dismantles his opponent's approach, piece by piece, until only his rhythm remains. His timing, precision, and capacity to shift gears separate him from the majority of champions. Where many fighters have a preferred range or a favored weapon, Crawford thrives in transitions. He can fight going forward or backward, inside or outside, in either stance. And perhaps most importantly, he remains composed. Even when under attack, he calculates rather than panics. It is this quality that makes him so dangerous for Canelo Alvarez, whose recent tendency to fight in bursts could leave him vulnerable to Crawford's adjustments. Yet the matchup is not so simple. Boxing is governed not only by skill but by physics. On paper, Alvarez has advantages that cannot be dismissed. He is naturally larger, stronger, and accustomed to absorbing the punches of light heavyweights. Crawford, for all his brilliance, is entering uncharted waters by moving up to face such a powerful opponent. The question becomes, can Crawford withstand the force of Alvarez's body shots, his counters, and his uppercuts? Skill alone cannot erase size, and every great smaller man who has dared to climb into the ring with a bigger champion has faced that brutal reality. If Alvarez chooses to fight aggressively, using his size to bully and impose himself, Crawford will face the sternest physical test of his career. The Mexican's left hook to the body remains among the best weapons in the sport, capable of changing the course of a fight with a single connection. If he commits to sustained pressure, keeps his guard high, and works behind jabs and combinations, he can potentially sap Crawford's speed and prevent him from dictating the rhythm. But Alvarez has not always chosen that path. Against Beivol, his approach was surprisingly passive, as though he trusted in isolated bursts of power to win rounds that slipped away. Against Golovkin in their third meeting, he boxed safely, content to manage rather than dominate. If he carries that mindset into a fight with Crawford, he may find himself gradually losing the exchanges, unable to match Crawford's activity or adjustments. For Crawford, the path to victory lies in patience and precision. He must withstand Alvarez's early physicality, avoid the kind of body shots that could slow his legs, and extend the fight into the later rounds where his ability to adapt can flourish. If he can keep Alvarez reacting rather than dictating, the smaller man's superior timing and accuracy may allow him to win rounds even against the stronger foe. The stakes, then, are not merely about belts or pound-for-pound rankings. This is about eras. Canelo Alvarez has long been considered the face of modern boxing, a fighter whose name carries the weight of pay-per-view stardom and global recognition. He has been the sport's standard-bearer for more than a decade. But time does not stand still. Every king eventually faces a challenger who threatens not just his record, but also his place in history. Crawford, though already an undisputed champion in multiple divisions, still lacks the mainstream recognition that Alvarez enjoys. A victory over Canelo would change that forever. It would confirm him as the fighter of his generation, the man who conquered size, fame, and reputation with pure skill. For Alvarez, the fight is equally defining. A victory would quiet doubts about his decline, prove that his loss to Beivol was not the beginning of the end, and reaffirm his status as boxing's leading figure. A defeat, however, would be devastating. To lose to a smaller man would feed narratives of erosion, of a career slipping into twilight. For a fighter who has built his legacy on dominance, such a result could mark the symbolic end of his reign. This is why September 2025 looms so large. It is not just another date on the calendar, but potentially the moment when one era ends and another begins. Boxing thrives on such turning points. Joe Louis had Rocky Marciano. Muhammad Ali had Larry Holmes. Julio Cesar Chavez had Oscar de la Hoya. Every legend eventually encounters the challenger who defines the arc of their final chapters. For Canelo Alvarez, Terence Crawford may be that man. The anticipation for this fight will not rest solely on the tactical breakdowns, though those will be endlessly debated. Fans will ask whether Alvarez can impose size, whether Crawford can neutralize it, whether the Mexican's durability can withstand Crawford's precision, and whether the Nebraskan's smaller frame can endure Alvarez's thudding power. Analysts will study footwork, angles, and prior performances for hints of what is to come. But beneath the technical discussions lies something deeper, the hunger to witness greatness. Fights like this are rare, where both participants are future Hall of Famers, each with legitimate claims to supremacy, and both risking not only victory or defeat but the narratives of their careers. Crawford will bring into the ring not only his skill but also his conviction. For years, he was criticized for not facing the top names at welterweight, a criticism erased by his destruction of Spence. He has waited for a challenge that could etch his name into the sport's permanent record, and now he has it. Alvarez, despite his immense resume, must prove he still belongs at the sport's pinnacle. Every fighter eventually confronts time, and while champions can fight opponents, they cannot fight age. The question is whether Canelo still has enough to repel a fighter as versatile as Crawford. When the bell rings, all speculation will fade. The ring has a way of stripping away narratives and exposing truth. If Alvarez can summon the relentless pressure of his younger days, if he can cut off the ring and target Crawford's body, he may remind the world why he was considered unbeatable at super middleweight. If Crawford can withstand those assaults, adapt, and gradually carve openings, he may prove that genius can transcend size. Either outcome will resonate far beyond one night, echoing through the history of boxing as the moment when two great careers intersected. As the world waits for September, the anticipation is not just for punches and rounds, but for answers. Is Canelo Alvarez still the king, or has his time passed? Is Terence Crawford merely a master of his natural divisions, or is he destined to conquer giants? Every era produces questions like these, and the answers define generations. What we know is this: Canelo versus Crawford is not simply a fight. It is a referendum on legacy, a clash of eras, and a test of philosophies. It is the Mexican superstar who built his name on strength, durability, and calculated aggression against the Nebraskan virtuoso who built his name on adaptation, intelligence, and mastery. When they meet, one man's legacy will rise, and the other's may begin to fade. And when the final bell sounds, boxing will have witnessed not only a contest of champions, but perhaps the end of an era and the birth of another.